This video is sponsored by Adept Roll. I have been racking my brain trying to come up with a good excuse to get some Saturn IX Terminators in my collection. One of the coolest things for the Horus Heresy, but I don't play Horus Heresy, I play 40k, and there's not a great count as. I don't just want these models to look pretty on the shelf, I want to play with these models, and there's not a great proxy for them in regular Space Marines. Centurion warsuits would be a good option, but if I wanted to get more Centurion warsuits, I would just buy more Centurion warsuits, because I love the Centurion warsuits. Nothing with the Loyalists was really jumping out to me, so then I started to think a little bit more chaotically. I have been painting up a bunch of different Chaos Legions and Warbands, and the thing I have discovered is a lot of the different colors are a lot of fun. If I was doing a Chaos Space Marine army, I wouldn't want to just stick to one specific Legion or Warband. I would want to take a look at every kit and then pick the colors, pick the theme that goes best with that kit. And the Saturn IX Terminators, I think, would make lovely Obliterators. Chaos Obliterators have been around forever, and they are big hulking monstrosities of muscle, armor, and weapons. And I think that they would be the perfect thing to represent some Saturn IX Terminators on the tabletop. And so I picked up 3 Saturn IXs. I have got a box of Obliterators, not the easiest kit to come by, but I've got them. And I want to see what they look like all mashed up together. The Saturn IX Terminator kit looks impressive, with 3 sprues absolutely loaded with parts. The Obliterator sprue, on the other hand, it's a kit. A monopose kit that builds 2 very static but decent looking gun nuts. I've never built either of these kits, so I want to get them assembled and take a look at them so I can start to see what options I have available to me for kitbashing and conversion. The Obliterators are a weird one because you can't just buy them. They come in a sprue with the Venom Crawler from a Versus box games which I published years ago, and they've never made it to their own standalone kit. I think because of that, you don't see them very often in Chaos Space Marine armies, which is a shame because they're pretty cool. I'm not gluing anything, just cutting and cleaning and looking at how the kit goes together. The 2 guys are very different on how they're cut. The bodies and legs are kind of stuck together, but the arms are luckily mostly separate, so there are some possibilities there. I think I like the second one a little more with the shoulder plasma and the heavy bolter, but they're both pretty fun. I've got the Obliterators all put together, just blue tack for right now. I haven't glued anything. I just want to get a feel for the kit, and it's kind of interesting. They're a little bit smaller than Centurions, especially my Centurions, because I've done some small edits to make them a little bit bigger. They're much closer in size to a regular modern Terminator suit, which I guess makes sense because even though they're heavily mutated and deformed, they're still guys, so I guess they do need to be guy-sized. Now I need to put together some Saturn IX Terminators, which are hopefully similarly guy-sized, so I can do a little mixing and matching. I want to end up with 2 squads of 2 guys. The Saturn IX suits are very different than the Obliterators. I had to look up instructions online because I bought them on eBay, and I'm glad I did. I would not have figured these guys out. Each and every part is a separate build. From his thighs to his ankles, even his feet are 2 parts each. On the big old chest, there's this big swooping Aquila, which I would like to know the lore on, because in the Horus Heresy, only the Emperor's children wore the Aquila. So did Saturn IX suits get grandfathered in, or is this kit meant mostly for the Emperor's children? Leave a comment if you know why, but I used my hobby knife and my sanding twigs to scrape it off. The Saturn IX kit has a sort of crazy amount of posability. The set I bought came with 3 suits, 2 of them will become Obliterators, and for that last one, I've got some ideas. Maybe a Terminator captain in ultra relic armor. The guns are interesting. I don't recognize them, some kind of a plasma and some kind of a las cannon looking thing. Luckily for the Obliterators war gear, it's not super important. They just need guns. Lots of guns. The power fists are also a nice include, although these fists are a little weenie. They're just a little bit smaller than Terminator power fists. I guess if you have less flexibility than a Lego man, you don't need the Rolls Royce of power fists, you just need something to get the job done. Blue tack and the suit together, it's really a dapper kit. The Saturn IX Terminator armor kit is delightful. Every single thing is separate and posable, and in terms of the scale, I would actually say they're still a little bit smaller than a Centurion warsuit. The Centurion warsuits, I think, still hold the record for chonkiest Space Marine, which is why they will forever be my favorite. Now that I have the Saturn IX Terminator armor built and the Obliterator armor built, my hypothesis was correct. They are just about perfect in terms of scale. The Saturn IX is a little bit taller, but in terms of the girthiness, they're really, really close. I'm thinking I'm gonna be able to mash these guys together. It won't be no problem, but I think it's possible. I want to do as much mixing and matching as possible. Like these Obliterators were all Saturn IX from back in the Horus Heresy age, but have since broken and mutated over the last 10,000 years to the point where they're a shell of their former glory. I used my jewelry saw to cut through the waist of the Obliterator. I'm thinking I'm going to swap the legs between these 2 kits. test fitting these legs, they do fit. I'm gonna need to build up some kind of a waist though. Looking at this big ol' Obliterator arm, I think it'll be a good fit. I just need to get rid of some of the shoulder. I dremeled it out and hacked it up as much as I could to make it look mangled, like his arm is sorta outgrew the armor. I need something inside of him to glue to, so I shoved some wads of paper towel and soaked them in super glue to harden them. Then I was able to get the arm to stick. This worked, so I decided to do the same thing for the waist, pouring more super glue until it was rock hard. For the other hand, I stuck on a Saturnine Power Fist arm, and I attached the left shoulder. I'll leave the right off this guy. Everyone will get at least one shoulder. I had plenty of room under his Obliterator arm, so I decided to sneak in a second arm, a little bolt pistol arm from the Chaos Legionary kit. I don't know if this is a chaotic growth or the pilot's original limb, but every little bit of firepower helps. That's one guy complete, on to the next. For the second guy, I'm going Obliterator on top, Saturnine on the bottom. I cut through the waist of the Saturnine armor and smoothed out the armor so it fit better. Then I carved off the heavy bolter so I can eventually get a Saturnine shoulder pad on him. I think this is gonna work. Now to pose his legs. I glue them in place with the leg up on a tactical rock pose, and I squished the two halves together with some green stuff. For the other arm, I attached a Saturnine arm, checking that it was low enough for the shoulder to fit on top, and I stuck the gun to the end as well. Since the shoulder doesn't super fit on the Obliterator torso, I squished it down with a lot of green stuff, and Obliterator number 2 is complete. Looking at the Reaper Chain Cannon Obliterator, this guy is gonna be really hard to convert. The only thing I can think is swapping one of his legs for a Saturnine one. They look very similar, so back to the saw for hacking. I used green stuff to get the leg to fit onto the waist, and I left him alone for a while to firm up. While I was waiting, I switched to the last guy, and I want this one to be mostly Saturnine, so I can really get the Saturnine experience. I hacked off the Saturnine hip balls so that I could get this leg to attach. Then I built the other leg so it would pretty much stand, and I had to extend the foot just a little bit with green stuff. But after some trial and error, I got him standing. Then for the torso, I built the Saturnine armor as intended, minus the head. I found this horny helmet from the Chaos Legionary kit, and after some clipping, I got it to fit in the Saturnine head hole so that the little ring would fit on top. This guy's Power Fist got the underslung flamethrower looking thingy, and for his right arm, a powerful looking plasma gun. After the shoulders went on, that's another suit all done, and he's looking decently chaotic. I think this guy is fine as mostly Saturnine, and to finish off Obliterator number 4, I'll do him as mostly Obliterator. All ranked up together, I think the squad is gonna look good. I can't wait to get this squad on the tabletop, but before that, I can know all the math hammer thanks to today's sponsor, Adept Roll. You ever wanted to do some post or pre-game math hammer? Well, Adept Roll is here to do all your calculations. Adept Roll lets you import attacking and defending profiles from 40k, then customizing that attack based on your exact unit composition, with weapon count, buffs, and abilities. I can perfectly calculate my Obliterator squad and see what they would do into any unit in the game. They absolutely wreck Space Marines. You'll see a visual funnel breaking attacks down into hits, failed saves, wounds, and dead models. Plus graphs that show both cumulative outcomes as a line and distinct results as bars so you can easily see the average and the spread as well. Where Adept Roll really shines is multi-unit simulations. Pick multiple units and Adept Roll runs every attack versus defender and defender versus attacker combination, giving you a true army versus army breakdown with an interactive visualization. Also, as a close combat connoisseur, I love the charge tool, which lets me see how likely I am to make my charge, even incorporating things like command point reroll and advance and charge, or how far I need to stay away in order not to get charged. If you use my code EONS, you'll get 10 free imports and 10 free explanations. Enter it after your first simulation or under more settings and miscellaneous. My Obliterators are now standing, and I feel like the Saturnine Terminator armor mixed into the squad adds a lovely elegance to them. An elegance that they probably shouldn't have because the lore of these suckers is that they are hideous amalgamations of flesh and gun. In fact, their weapons are called the flesh metal guns. Are they made of meat or do they shoot meat? Who's to say? If you take a look at the squad, you'll notice each individual guy has a completely unique set of weapons, and that is by design. The flesh metal gun is not one specific weapon, but referencing the fact that Chaos will provide these suckers with whatever weapon they need. And this tidbit of lore is actually represented in the rules. The Obliterators have a 3-profile weapon. The first profile is an actually good melt-a-gun with strength 12, the second profile is an anti-Space Marine strength 8 weapon, and the last profile is a strength 5, which is good against pretty much everything else. And I get to pick which profile I want to shoot with every time. The Chaos Obliterators are kinda decent. And my guys turned out kinda decent, but I played it a little fast and loose with the Kitbashing, so they need a little bit of TLC to get them ready for painting. While I'm converting, I like to keep hacking and gluing. It helps with the creative flow. But now I need to cross my T's and dot my I's, and I have some gap filling and perfecting to do. I used my hobby knife to scuff up the clean Saturnine armor parts, and I mixed up a big batch of greenaput, which is equal parts green stuff and milliput, my favorite sculpting recipe, for easy sculpting that dries with the sturdy rubberiness of green stuff. I smeared this stuff over the paper towel using my silicone sculpting tools to smooth it out. Luckily, flesh metal is pretty abstract, so if my sculpting isn't perfect, it'll still look nice and chaotic. With my silicone brushes, I tried to sculpt in some metal abs. Switching to some popsicle sticks, I carved into chisels. This worked. Luckily, you can't see his belly too closely, just some shapes will be fine. I sculpted his spine on his back and touched up the abs, and I think this was pretty successful. Time for the next fix. This one guy has a giant hole in his back. I filled it in with green stuff and then continued these little hinges from the Saturnine armor up onto his new back. Then I filled in the remains of the hacked off heavy bolter, tucking the green stuff right under his shoulder pad. For his front, it's a little bit too noticeable where the Obliterator ends and the Saturnine begins. So I smoothed out this section and then carved a little armor plate that I blended into his big square-faced armor. And I pressed in some trim to make it look a little bit more like it was meant to be there. The Saturnine backpacks have these nice little sockets. I drilled out some of these and inserted some aluminum wire. This stuff is soft, but not soft enough to pose on the model. On a second try, I was able to get a nice piece that looked like it's hanging off of him, and I put a second one leading to his meltaguns. Then I had an idea looking at the spot I carved off the Aquila. I took some very thin plastic card and made myself up some really small arrows. I want these radiating out from his head. I don't know what arrows have to do with chaos, but you see them all over the place. For one suit, I made 3 little arrows that I attached with plastic glue, and for the last guy, I made 2 big chunky arrows so that there was some variety. Now the dream team is perfectly chaotic and ready for some bases. I sunk the magnets into some Cobalt Keep 50mm bases and broke out the 1/4 inch cork, available at EonsOfBattle.com. I made myself some triangles of cork. I want to make some jagged, molten, chaotic rocks for my Obliterators to be marching over. I put a big piece of cork right in the middle of the base and then started gluing on some more triangles, sticking these on at angles so that they point up using hot glue and ultra-thin super glue to keep them in place. I tore up the cork with my fingers to round the triangles into sharp points, and I did a second row of spikes. Once I was happy with the shape, I used my Dremel tool to smooth and shape the surface so that it was the right angle for my Saturnine suits to stand on, and I glued them down with lots of thick super glue. To fill in the in-between sections of cork, I sprinkled on some sand, letting it settle into the recesses, and I poured some ultra-thin super glue over these piles to permanently lock them in position. My inspiration for this base design was from a Black Legionary I painted up years ago. This is where my chaotic corruption began. I've got my Obliterators all ready to rock and roll, and the color scheme that I'm going to go with for these suckers is Iron Warriors. In collecting my Chaos Space Marine army, I want each of my units to look its absolute best, and to be wearing the colors of the warband or legion that best represents them. And for the Obliterators, and a couple of other things I would like to add to my army, like the heavy weapon wielding Havocs and the Disco Lord and Hellstalker, I think they're going to look pretty good in Iron Warriors. I primed my chunky boys in black, and I think step 1 is actually going to be the Hazard Stripe shoulder pads. I sprayed white ink over these spots to prime them in white so I can yellow them later. And speaking of yellowing, step 1 is actually pink. I put familiar pink into my airbrush, speed paint flows beautifully through the airbrush, and it gave me a lovely tinge in the recesses, making them look like Emperor's Children-y. Then I put some Imperial Fist contrast paint into my airbrush, a lovely yellow color, and I sprayed this right over everything. This turned the white into a brilliant yellow, and over the pink, it darkened into an ultra-saturated orange. This 1-2 punch looks incredible. I sprayed these sections with the satin varnish to protect the fragile airbrush layers, and now for the striping. I want to airbrush this too, but it's going to require some stencils. I took a playing card and marked out some stripes. I cut these out, leaving me with a comb-shaped stencil, but I'm not using this on the mini. The stencil is to help me cut tape. I sprayed some black paint over my stencil, leaving me with painted stripes that I can cut consistently over and over. Now I can take these and place them over the shoulders. Once I had them all covered, I sprayed some more black paint, being gentle and trying not to get the paint to sneak under the tape. After 2 thin coats, I was able to peel off these stickers and reveal the perfect crispy yellow underneath. This worked great. I went back to my stencil and made myself some more stripes. I'm gonna need a lot, but it'll be worth it. I used the same black paint that I put on the model to spray over the stencil too. Out of all the guys, I only had one little accident where my tweezers scratched the plastic and the tape pulled off some paint. It's annoying, but I think I'm gonna leave it alone. I bet by the end of the paint job, it'll barely be noticeable. Everything else worked perfectly. Now, 30% of my guys are 100% done. I was thinking of masking over my hazards to continue airbrushing, but I think there's an easier way. I tidied up the minis with black paint over the leftover yellow overspray. Then I grabbed some death metal. This bottle at some point got splattered in neon green. I blame Sean. It's a great color for dark, warm brass. I used a dry brush to put this over most of the mini, really working the bristles into the nooks and crannies to get a nice base coat down. Right along the shoulder pads, I switched to a brush so I could be careful around the hazards, and right before I go any further, I think I should actually finish those hazard stripes. I took some yellow paint that matches my airbrush layers and sponged this over the pads to make them look chipped and weathered. With that done, I can finish off picking out all the remaining metal. Now the models are dark and warm, it's time to start brightening. I took some Cerakote silver and dry brushed this over the metal bodies, letting some of that primer black and death metal show in the undersides and recesses. Now my metal boys are looking shiny, I really want to put on a red wash. But acrylic wash would tint my minis too much and an oil wash would take too long to dry. So I'm thinking pigment powder will give me what I want. I made up a slurry of this red-brown, mixing in a little bit of black to darken it. Then I slobbered this all over the minis, putting it on thick and using a wet brush to push it around. Once they were fully saturated, I misted the minis with a squirt bottle to lift the powders off the surface and help them to settle in the recesses. Once that was dry, I used a wet dry brush to wipe away the pigments off the raised areas, leaving me with the look I was after. I hosed down the whole crew in satin varnish to lock these pigments in place permanently. Now I've got that tinge of red I was after, I can finish up the metal with some dry brushing a mithril blade, a very bright silver for the shiniest parts of the metal. They're kinda done. The flesh metal is painted, the hazard striping is on there, but they need a little something, and I don't know what that something is. It's definitely another color, but what color? I feel like there's no wrong answers, but I don't know what the right one is either. I have to do some experimenting. I think another color would be very striking, but a little bit too much. I instead decided on red for the glowy bits. Since there's so much red on the model already and I want to do the bases in red, I think it'll all work together. I sprayed this over their eyes, all their little lenses, and the weapons. These guys are powered by the warp, so I want them positively glowing. And you know what else glows positively? That's right, our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, Greytide Studio bits for spicing up your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, basing cork, and we got glue, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue. And we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. New in February, we have created the Invaded City Bits Pack, a series of thematic pieces to tell the story of an alien civilization awakening underneath an oblivious Gothic city. This pack features tile bits for filling in the flat sections of bases, and many obelisks and pyramids of varying sizes to show the power of this alien architecture. There's also plenty of Gothic elements to show the poor human settlement that is quickly being overtaken by implacable metal. And of course, no alien takeover would be complete without some critters to sprinkle some otherworldly flavor over your bases. This terrain pack is available physically and as STL on EonsOfBattle.com. With the airbrush layers on there, I switched to a bright saturated red and painted this over the lenses with a smaller dot of red mixed with orange and then a small blob of orange right in the center of each lens. I want these spots to look molten, but not too bright. A dot of white or pink would desaturate them. I want to push the red as far as I can. I spent some time picking out all the little ports of the weapons, and I did one final round of highlighting with a light orange with just a tiny little dot right at the top of each lens and exhaust port. Now my guys are done, it's time to finish up those bases. I took some black paint and dry brushed this all over the bases. This hit on the raised surface and the tops of the sand, leaving the red in the cracks. After a dry brushing, I did a sponging to get some more black paint on there, and I airbrushed a little bit of black all around the base rim. I felt like the red was a little bit dull, so I sprayed some more red ink over the base to push the saturation, and I hit the rim of the base with a gloss black paint. Now my guys are looking nice, but there's one more red effect that I want to put on, and that's blood. I took some blood for the Blood God technical paint and a piece of sponge, and I stamped this on them. I used this random sponging as a guide, and I took some more paint onto a brush and connected some of the specks of paint and some drippies to really sell this effect. Chaos is messy, and I don't imagine these guys wash their armor much, so having them dripping with blood adds another chaotic touch. My Obliterators, my Saturnine Terminator Obliterators. These guys have absolutely achieved my goal of getting to play around with the Saturnine Terminator kit, and I've got 2 units to show for it. Two-man squads of Obliterators. I love these guys. They're gonna shoot like a truck, they're gonna punch like a truck, they're gonna kill some Space Marines. These guys turned out exceptional, and I can't imagine Obliterators as anything else than Iron Warriors. And that's my plan going forward with Chaos Space Marines. If there's a unit that I want in my army, and the coolest way I can picture it is as Alpha Legion, or Word Bearers, or Emperor's Children. I got a really spicy idea for some Emperor's Children Raptors. Whatever is the coolest thing that I can think of, I'm gonna make it happen. These big chunky guys in their big chunky armor, with the kitbashing flowing throughout the squad, these are the abominations that I had in my head. I've got 2 squads of Obliterators, that is 320 points of Chaos Space Marines, and if Games Workshop ever decides to make a proper box for the Obliterators, I could do a 3rd squad. I still got the template, so I can recreate those hazard stripes whenever I want. And please let me know in the comments below, you Chaos Space Marine players out there, what are some of the must-have units for a Chaos Space Marine army? Thanks for watching. And don't forget about Adept Roll, the all-in-one math hammer app for iOS and Android.